Fractured foundations, the September rain drummed steadily against the window pane as Aisha Bennett stared at the signature line on the divorce papers. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the pen. 6 years of marriage, reduced to a few legal documents and a notary's stamp. Are you sure about this? Her lawyer, Josephine, asked softly. Aisha nodded, her throat tight. We've been living separate lives for nearly a year now. This just makes it official. Across the polished mahogany table, Marcos Reyes sat with perfect posture, his expression unreadable behind a carefully cultivated professional mask. The ambitious architect she'd fallen in love with during their university days had transformed into someone she barely recognized, or perhaps someone she'd never truly known. Their love story had begun brilliantly. Aisha, the passionate environmental scientist with dreams of conservation work, had been captivated by Marcos's vision to create sustainable urban spaces. They'd bonded over late-night discussions about changing the world, making promises under starlit skies about the life they'd build together. Reality had different plans. Marcos's career skyrocketed when he joined Prism Architects, an international firm that quickly recognized his talent. The promotions came rapidly, along with longer hours, frequent travel, and a shift in priorities. Meanwhile, Aisha's research position at the Riverdale Environmental Institute remained steady but demanding, keeping her rooted to their Midwestern hometown. Just one more project, he'd say. One more client. One more year. The promises piled up alongside cancelled anniversaries and holiday plans. The breaking point came when Marcos declined a local partnership that would have kept him home, choosing instead a prestigious position that required even more travel. Aisha still remembered his words. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. You can't ask me to give this up. I'm not asking you to give up your dreams, she'd replied, tears streaming down her face. I'm asking you to include me in them. The silence that followed had been their marriage's death knell. Now, 18 months later, they sat in this sterile conference room, dividing assets and untangling lives with clinical precision. Their small downtown apartment had been sold, the furniture divided. Aisha would keep her grandmother's antique bookcase. Marcos, his collection of architectural models. Joint accounts closed, memories catalogued and separated like artifacts from a lost civilization. Aisha signed her name with a swift, decisive motion. When she looked up, she caught Marcos watching her, a flicker of something, regret, relief, crossing his face before disappearing behind his professional veneer. Well, he said, standing and buttoning his tailored suit jacket, I hope you find what you're looking for. Aisha, you too, Marcos. The words felt hollow, insufficient for the closure of a chapter that had once held so much promise. Their lawyers exchanged pleasantries as Marcos gathered his briefcase. He paused at the door, turning slightly as if to say something more, but instead offered a small nod before disappearing into the hallway. Aisha sat motionless, listening to his footsteps fade. Only when the building's front door closed with a distant thud did she allow herself to exhale the breath she'd been holding. Are you all right? Josephine asked, gathering the papers. I will be, Aisha replied, though uncertainty clouded her voice. Outside, the rain continued, washing away the last day of her married life. What she couldn't tell anyone, not Josephine, not her sister Dahlia, and certainly not Marcos, was the secret she'd been carrying for exactly 2 weeks and 3 days. The faint blue line on a pregnancy test that had appeared just as their marriage disappeared. The unspoken truth Aisha stared at the ultrasound image in her hands, tracing the fuzzy outline with her fingertip. 12 weeks. A tiny heartbeat fluttering within her, a secret growing steadily despite the chaos surrounding it. Everything looks healthy, Dr. Patel said, her warm smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. Would you like to know the gender, or are you waiting? I'd like to know, Aisha replied softly. Another decision made alone. The doctor pointed to the screen. It's a girl. Strong heartbeat, developing right on schedule. A daughter. Aisha's eyes welled with tears. Joy mingled with apprehension. She had already begun to love this unexpected miracle, even as anxiety about the future gnawed at her. 6 weeks had passed since the divorce was finalized. 6 weeks of morning sickness disguised as stomach flu to concerned colleagues. 6 weeks of contemplating a phone call she couldn't bring herself to make. Marcos had rights. This was his child too. But the thought of telling him froze her in place. Their last conversation replayed in her mind. His casual mention of relocating to Singapore for a year-long project. Fresh start, he'd called it. How could she disrupt that with news of a pregnancy? What if he thought she'd planned this? A desperate attempt to salvage what they'd lost? Or worse, what if he simply didn't care? The apartment Aisha had rented after selling their home felt temporary, transitional. Beige walls and minimal furniture reflecting her unsettled state. Each evening, she'd curl up on her second-hand sofa, legal pad in hand, writing pros and cons, scenarios and outcomes, searching for clarity that remained elusive. "Have you told the father?" Dr. Patel asked, breaking into Aisha's thoughts. "It's complicated," she answered, the understatement of the year. "We're divorced recently." Dr. Patel nodded without judgment. "These situations are never easy. But remember, you have options and support. I can refer you to our family counselor if that would help." Aisha accepted the referral card, though she doubted she would use it. The problem wasn't lack of resources, but the paralyzing fear of reopening wounds barely beginning to heal. That evening, Dahlia arrived bearing takeout containers and sisterly concern. At 38, 5 years Aisha's senior, she'd appointed herself protector since their parents' passing years ago. "You look exhausted," Dahlia observed, unpacking vegetable curry and naan. "Is the research project still running you ragged?" The lie hovered on Aisha's tongue, ready and practiced. Instead, she found herself reaching for the ultrasound image tucked in her journal. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, sliding the picture across the coffee table. Dahlia froze, fork suspended mid-air. "How? When?" She stopped, composing herself. "Marcos!" Aisha nodded. "Does he know?" "No." The word fell between them, heavy with implications. "Aisha," Dahlia began, her tone a mixture of concern and gentle reproach. "He's in Singapore, starting over, building skyscrapers and chasing accolades." Aisha's voice cracked. "We failed at building something together once already. I don't want to force him into fatherhood out of obligation. This isn't just about him," Dahlia countered. "It's about you and this baby and what you both deserve." The conversation circled for hours, landing where it began, with Aisha uncertain and afraid. After Dahlia left, promising support regardless of her decision, Aisha stood by the apartment window, watching city lights flicker against the night sky. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach. "It's just us for now," she whispered to her daughter. "But we'll figure this out." The following weeks brought practical preparations. Aisha negotiated flexible work arrangements with her sympathetic director at the institute. She began converting the apartment's spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft sage green, a color that reminded her of spring and new beginnings. Each morning sickness episode, each prenatal vitamin, each small baby item purchased made her secret more real and the absence of Marcos more pronounced. Some nights she drafted messages to him that remained unsent. "We're having a baby. I didn't plan this. I'm scared too." As her second trimester progressed and her body changed, concealment became impossible. Colleagues offered congratulations. Friends asked delicate questions about her plans. To most, she offered simplified explanations. Yes, it was unexpected. No, she was managing alone. "Thank you for your concern." Only in the quietest moments did Aisha acknowledge the complete truth, that alongside her fear lived a tiny, persistent hope that somehow this child might heal what she and Marcos couldn't fix themselves. Separate lives, the humid Singapore air clung to Marcos's skin as he reviewed blueprints spread across his desk. 4 months into the Horizon Tower project, and sleep had become a luxury he rarely afforded himself. Outside his glass-walled office, the city sparkled with midnight energy, indifferent to his isolation. His phone buzzed. A message from his colleague, Tariq. "Team drinks at Clark Key? You've earned it after that presentation." Marcos declined with a polite excuse. Social invitations had lost their appeal, each gathering a reminder of how thoroughly he'd transplanted himself into this foreign soil. At 35, he'd achieved the career milestones he'd once dreamed about, with Aisha under starlit skies. International recognition, innovative projects, the professional respect he'd craved. The hollowness of these victories caught him by surprise. 7,000 miles away, Aisha waddled through the farmer's market, her 6-month belly preceding her like a gentle announcement. She selected ripe avocados while chatting with her new neighbor Priya, a pediatric nurse who had become an unexpected friend and pregnancy confidant. "Have you decided on a name yet?" Priya asked, helping Aisha with her canvas bags. "I'm thinking Natalia," she replied. "It means birthday in Latin. Seems fitting." Her phone chimed with a reminder, tomorrow's birthing class. Another milestone to face alone. Though not entirely alone, Dahlia had insisted on attending as her support person, and a small community of friends had rallied around her. Her colleagues at the Institute had thrown a surprise baby shower last week, gifting handmade blankets and tiny science-themed onesies. The nursery was complete now, the crib assembled by Dahlia's husband, with only minimal cursing. Aisha had created a mobile of paper birds and stars that hung above it, catching afternoon light. Sometimes she sat in the rocking chair there, reading research papers aloud to her daughter, explaining watershed conservation and ecosystem rehabilitation in soothing tones. In a hotel bar in Jakarta, where he'd flown for a consultation, Marcos scrolled through social media absent-mindedly. His thumb froze over a photo posted by a mutual friend, a group at what appeared to be a baby shower. He zoomed in, his heart catching at the sight of Aisha in the background, smiling radiantly, her hand resting on a prominent baby bump. The world tilted on its axis. Dates calculated rapidly in his mind, the timing, the possibilities. The phone slipped from his suddenly numb fingers. That night he drafted and deleted a dozen messages. Each seemed inadequate, presumptuous. What right did he have to question, to insert himself back into her life? The woman in the photo looked happy, settled. Perhaps she had moved on completely, found someone new. The thought burned like acid in his chest. Instead of sending any message, Marcos called his project director that night and requested an early transfer back to the States. "Family emergency," he explained vaguely. His request was reluctantly approved. The Singapore team could manage the remaining implementation phases without him. As winter settled over Riverdale, Aisha faced her 3rd trimester with determined practicality. She completed a childbirth education course, interviewed pediatricians, and finalized her maternity leave plans. The research grant she'd been pursuing was awarded, ensuring her professional projects would continue under her remote supervision after Natalia's birth. Still, loneliness crept in during quiet evenings when the baby's kicks reminded her of her singular responsibility. Occasionally, she allowed herself to imagine an alternate reality, one where she and Marcos had weathered their differences, where he would place his hands on her belly in wonder, where they would argue good-naturedly over nursery colors and parenting philosophies. On a snowy February morning, Aisha sat at her kitchen table reviewing hospital pre-registration forms. The father's information section stared back at her, blank and accusatory. Her pen hovered uncertainly. Despite everything, could she truly erase Marcos from their child's birth certificate, from their daughter's life story? The decision crystallized. After Natalia's birth, she would contact him. Not for herself, not to reclaim what they had lost, but for their daughter's future. The realization brought both anxiety and relief, a path forward. At last. Unexpected reunion. March arrived with unpredictable weather, brilliant sunshine followed by sudden squalls, much like Aisha's emotions in her final pregnancy weeks. Heavy with child and anticipation, she waddled through her apartment, rearranging already organized baby supplies for the third time that week. The doorbell's unexpected chime startled her. Probably Dahlia with more unnecessary groceries, she thought fondly. Making her way to the entrance, she opened the door. Marcos stood on her threshold, travel-worn and uncertain, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. 8 months of separation collapsed into a single breathless moment. His eyes widened as they dropped to her unmistakable belly. "It's true," he whispered. Aisha gripped the doorframe for support. Why are you... Words failed her as emotions collided. Shock, anger, relief. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice tentative in a way she'd never heard before. The confident architect seemed diminished somehow, vulnerability evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. She stepped back wordlessly, allowing him entry into the home he'd never seen. His gaze traveled over the modest living room, lingering on prenatal books stacked beside the sofa, and tiny clothes folded in a laundry basket. "I saw a photo," he explained, removing his coat with awkward movements. "At first I wondered if I'd moved on," Aisha supplied, lowering herself carefully onto the sofa. "Replaced you?" He nodded, looking ashamed. "Then I counted months, dates. 8.5 months pregnant," she confirmed. "Conceived just before the divorce." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken accusations and questions. Finally Marcos spoke, his voice raw. "Why didn't you tell me?" The simple question broke something inside her. Tears spilled without warning. "You were gone. Singapore, your fresh start. What was I supposed to do? Use a baby to force you to stay when you'd made it clear your career came first?" "That's not fair," he said, though his tone lacked conviction, "isn't it?" Her hands cradled her belly protectively. "You chose boardrooms over our living room for years. Why would a nursery be any different?" Marcos sank into the chair opposite her, running hands through his hair in a familiar gesture that twisted her heart. "I've made mistakes," he admitted. "But this," he gestured toward her pregnancy, "this should have been my choice too." The baby kicked vigorously, as if responding to the tension in the room. Aisha winced, then made a sudden decision. She reached for Marcos's hand and placed it on the side of her belly, where their daughter performed acrobatics. His expression transformed as he felt the movements, wonder replacing anger, connection overriding hurt. "That's your daughter," Aisha finished. "Natalia. That's what I've been calling her. Natalia," he repeated softly, testing the name. His eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "She's strong, like her father," Aisha admitted reluctantly. "Stubborn, too." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Like her mother." The following hours passed in cautious conversation. Marcos explained his return to the States, his temporary apartment across town, his transfer to the firm's regional office. Aisha shared her pregnancy journey, medical updates, preparation for maternity leave. They circled each other verbally, navigating this new reality with careful steps. As evening approached, Marcos rose to leave. "I'd like to be involved," he said, standing awkwardly by the door. "However you'll allow me." Aisha studied him, the man she'd loved, lost, and now faced across an unexpected bridge. "The birth is in 3 weeks. I'll have my doctor add you to the contact list." His face registered surprise, followed by profound gratitude. "Thank you." After he left, Aisha sat in the nursery rocking chair, processing the day's seismic shift. Nothing was resolved, nothing promised, yet everything had changed. For better or worse, Natalia would know her father. Rebuilding bridges, the harsh fluorescent hospital lights cast everyone in an unflattering glow as Marcos paced the delivery ward hallway. 18 hours into labor, and Aisha's occasional screams from behind closed doors twisted his insides with helpless anxiety. "She's doing great," Dahlia reassured him during her brief emergence for coffee. "The epidural's helping," Marcos nodded, continuing his restless movement. He had no right to be in the delivery room. They'd agreed on that boundary. But leaving the hospital was unthinkable. So he waited, alternating between sitting and pacing. his architect's mind unable to design a solution for this particular problem, how to rebuild what had been dismantled by years of neglect. Shortly after midnight, Delia burst through the doors, eyes bright with tears. "She's here!" 7 pounds, 4 ounces. "They're both doing well." The relief nearly buckled his knees. "Can I—" "Aisha's asking for you," Dahlia replied. Her previous hostility softened by the night's miracle, the sight of Aisha, exhausted, radiant, cradling a tiny bundle, stopped Marcos at the threshold. She looked up, offering a tired smile and a slight nod. "Meet your daughter," she whispered as he approached cautiously. Natalia was impossibly small, her face scrunched in sleep, dark hair plastered to her head. When Marcos extended his finger, she grasped it reflexively, her entire hand barely encircling his fingertip. "She's perfect," he managed, voice thick with emotion. "She has your chin," Aisha observed. "Poor thing." The joke, their first moment of genuine lightness in nearly a year, broke something open between them. Marcos laughed softly, blinking back tears. The weeks following Natalia's birth established a tentative co-parenting routine. Marcos visited daily, learning to change diapers, prepare bottles of expressed milk, soothe infant cries. Aisha watched his transformation from distance to devotion with cautious optimism. On a warm May evening, Natalia sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. They sat on Aisha's small balcony, sharing a rare, quiet moment. "I was offered partnership at the firm today," Marcos said. Breaking their comfortable silence, Aisha tensed. Memories of similar announcements that had preceded disappearances. "Congratulations," she replied carefully. "Which city?" "Here," he clarified quickly. "I turned down Singapore permanently. Told them I needed roots." The implication hung in the air between them. Aisha studied her hands. "Why did you come back, really?" "Before you knew about Natalia?" Marcos considered his response carefully. "I achieved everything I thought I wanted," he finally said. The prestigious project's international recognition, and it meant nothing without someone to share it with. He met her eyes directly. "Without you, we can't just pick up where we left off," Aisha cautioned. "Too much has happened." "I'm not asking for that," he assured her. "I'm asking for a chance to show you I've changed, to be Natalia's father, and maybe someday to see if there's anything left to rebuild between us." Inside, the baby's whimper escalated to a hungry cry. They both rose automatically, parental instincts overriding personal uncertainty. As Aisha settled in the rocking chair with Natalia at her breast, Marcos prepared a glass of water for her, remembering how thirsty nursing made her. The simple domesticity of the moment, their synchronized movements in service of their daughter, felt like a foundation being cautiously relayed. "One day at a time," Aisha proposed, looking up at him. "No promises beyond that," Marcos nodded, understanding the gift hidden within her caution. "One day at a time," he agreed. 3 months later, Marcos helped Aisha and Natalia move into a garden apartment with more space and natural light. Though he maintained his separate residence, the boundaries between their lives grew increasingly permeable. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Then movie nights after Natalia's bedtime. Small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing the baby, tested new possibilities. On Natalia's first birthday, surrounded by friends and family in the park, Aisha watched Marcos helping their daughter blow out her candle. The journey from fractured past to this imperfect but hopeful present had been neither straight nor simple. Trust rebuilt in tiny increments, forgiveness offered in silent gestures. Love rekindled not in grand moments but ordinary ones. Later, as they walked home together, Natalia sleeping against her father's chest, Aisha reached for Marcos's free hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For coming back. For staying. For proving me wrong about you." His fingers tightened around hers, a silent promise more trustworthy than words had ever been. Ahead of them, the path was uncertain but shared. A bridge constructed not from secret pregnancies or dramatic revelations, but from the patient work of two people who had learned, at last, to choose each other every single day.